For some time now, the news headlines have constantly shown us numbers of victims and attacks in Gaza, Lebanon, Israel. We hear many names, Hamas, Palestine, but do you know the reason behind this war? In this video, we will try to explain the root cause of this conflict. To do so, we'll start with the basics, getting to know the enemy sides. On one side, we have the State of Israel, with Judaism as its religion. And on the other, the State of Palestine, recognized by very few countries and where the majority of the population is Sunni Muslim. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim the right to inhabit the area we know as Israel. The Israelis claim sovereignty over the city as descendants of the ancient Hebrew people, designating it as their promised land. Meanwhile, Palestinians consider themselves descendants of the Philistines, a people who inhabited the area more than 3,000 years ago. To understand this, we need to travel back in time. Since the 1st century AD, Jews have lived in exile, although there was a significant presence of Jews in what we know today as Israel. According to Judaism and the Bible, the land of Israel, or Zion, is the promised land given by God to the Jews. After the Bar Kokhba rebellion from 132 to 135 AD, the Jews were expelled. However, the longing to return to what they considered their historical homeland always remained within them. Now that we know both peoples, let's jump forward in time again. By the late 19th century, Israel was part of the Ottoman Empire. During this period, Zionism was born, a political ideology and movement that proposed establishing a state for the Jewish people in Palestine. This movement arose in Europe and was founded by Theodor Herzl as a response to the hatred towards Jews that existed in Europe at the time. In summary, it sought to give Jews the right to their historical territory, which was the land of Israel or Zion, hence the word Zionism. The Jews wanted to be in Jerusalem because God had promised it to them. Starting in 1882, a massive migration of Jews to Palestine began. In this first migration, known as the First Aliyah, around 35,000 Jews arrived in Palestine. The second Aliyah occurred in 1904 when Zionism, as mentioned earlier, gained great popularity, and many Israelis migrated to Palestine once again. However, when World War I broke out, the Ottoman Empire fell, and the United Kingdom took control of Palestine. Thanks to the British control over the territory, Jewish migrations to Palestine multiplied significantly. Driven by the discrimination and prejudice against Jews in Europe, known as anti-Semitism. It was preferable for them to leave Europe than to stay. As a result, the Jewish population in Palestine grew from 8% in 1882 to 28% by 1936. In the following years, there were 5 more waves of massive Jewish migration, sparking major attacks between Muslims and Jews, such as the Hebron massacre. This created significant tensions between the two communities, leading the Jews to form their own defense force known as the Haganah. Additionally, a group of radical Jews called Irgun emerged, launching several attacks against the British in Palestine to pressure the UK into creating the State of Israel. The choice was clear. Either they took action and gave the Jews what they wanted, or the violence would continue. During World War II, a new wave of Jewish migration from Europe to Palestine took place, with the vast majority trying to escape the Nazi Holocaust. After the war ended, a year later in 1946, the radical Jewish group Irgun carried out an attack on the British headquarters in Palestine, causing 92 deaths. This led to the United Kingdom finally growing tired of being caught in the middle of a conflict that didn't concern them, so they decided to withdraw from Palestine the following year and leave the conflict for someone else to resolve. Then, in 1947, the UN approved a plan that divided Palestine into 2 states, giving Muslims and Jews a similar amount of land. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was proclaimed in the territory approved by the UN. And what did the Arabs do in response? Well, 2 days after Israel's independence, the Palestinians, supported by Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and Transjordan, declared war on the Israelis. But not only did the Jews not lose the war, they also managed to increase their territory by over 20% beyond what had been designated by the UN. The Gaza Strip was occupied by Egypt and the West Bank by Transjordan. As a result of this war in the area controlled by Israel, the Israelis took the homes of over 700,000 Arabs. While in the area controlled by the Arabs, they expelled the Jews, including several communities that had been established there for many years. In 1956, Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal and blocked the Straits of Tiran, which was the entrance to the Israeli port. And how did the Jews respond? Well, allied with the United Kingdom and France, they invaded Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and defeated their army. However, the UN forced the Israelis to withdraw in exchange for an agreement to create a demilitarized zone in the Suez Canal, thus protecting Israel's access. However, in 1967, the UN soldiers, also known as the Blue Helmets, had withdrawn, and the Straits of Tiran were once again blocked by the Arabs. Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and Jordan then prepared to attack Israel in what is known as the Six-Day War. Despite being hit by 4 countries, Israel won the war again and invaded the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian territories of the West Bank, and the Golan Heights, which belonged to Syria. In 1973, the Arabs attacked again in the Yom Kippur War to recover the Golan Heights and the Sinai Peninsula. This is when the major world powers came into play. The United States supported Israel, and the Soviet Union supported the Arabs. The victory went to Israel once again, although they conceded in negotiations to return the Sinai territories to Egypt, but of course not for free. In return, Egypt would recognize Israel, becoming the first Arab country to do so and ceasing to be an enemy. As for the Palestinian territories, Israel agreed to return part of them, but not all. In 1982, Israel invaded southern Lebanon to prevent Palestinian guerrillas from entering its territory. This Israeli presence continued until the year 2000. And in 2006, Israel struck Lebanon to attack the Hezbollah militia. The Israelis have continued to expand their territory and colonize more and more, establishing several Jewish settlements in Palestinian territories. This led to the outbreak of the First Intifada in 1987, a Palestinian uprising involving riots and protests against Israeli rule. The images that reached the rest of the world shocked everyone. Videos and photos of children hitting soldiers and people attacking Israeli tanks with stones, to which the tanks responded with fire. With this situation, the Arabs created Hamas, a paramilitary organization with a strong religious character, which sought to take control of the Palestinian resistance, which at that time was in the hands of the PLO. The PLO was an organization with a more political than religious character. But what happened to them? In 1988, the PLO declared the independence of Palestine, although the UN did not recognize it. The president of this organization, Yasser Arafat, officially recognized the state of Israel in a letter sent to the Israeli Prime Minister. And in response, Israel recognized the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. This marked the beginning of the Oslo Accords and the Palestinian National Authority, which recognized the right of Palestinians to self-govern in Gaza and the West Bank. However, once again, peace was not established between the two peoples, and the violence in Jewish settlements in Palestinian territory continued. As a result, in 2000, the Second Intifada broke out, which was much more violent and bloody than the first, with several attacks involved. Israel responded with more repression, backed by its great ally, the United States. The 9/11 attacks further deepened the divide between the United States and the Arab world, strengthening their alliance with Israel even more. During this Intifada, which lasted several years, the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat died, paving the way for the rise of the Hamas, which further radicalized the conflict. As a result of the Second Intifada, in 2005, Israeli civilians withdrew from the Gaza Strip, and dismantled several of their settlements in the West Bank. They had thousands of Israeli soldiers there to protect only 8,000 Jewish settlers surrounded by more than 1 million Palestinians. Hamas became very powerful in the Gaza Strip, so Israel withdrew its forces and built a separation barrier, a wall of over 700 kilometers to isolate them and prevent Hamas from obtaining more weapons. However, it is important to note that Israel still controlled Gaza's airspace, land borders, and coastline, subjecting the Strip to a shortage of supplies that hindered its development. Hamas seized upon Israel's withdrawal to claim credit for the victory, attributing it to their armed resistance. Thanks to this victory, they won the 2006 elections. In the internal struggle for power, the two Arab political parties, Hamas and Fatah, began to clash. By June 2007, the low-level confrontations between these two parties escalated into local warfare, with massacres on both sides. The conflict ended with Hamas controlling the Gaza Strip and Fatah controlling the West Bank, with support from the Madrid Quartet. That same year, in an attempt to weaken Hamas, Israel and Egypt imposed a severe blockade on the Gaza Strip, blocking all crossings and the export of most goods, including some basic necessities. Goods and people could only enter and exit in a trickle, leading Gazans to feel like prisoners in an open-air prison. Approximately 1.5 million Palestinians in Gaza survived at that time on humanitarian aid and smuggling through a network of tunnels on the Egyptian border. After 6 months of truce between Hamas and Israel in response to the ongoing blockade and humanitarian crisis, Hamas broke the truce and began launching rockets into Israel. This led to a cycle of violent conflicts, notably in 2008, 2012, and 2014. The death toll from these conflicts was significant. In the 2014 conflict, over 2,000 people, mostly civilians, died in Gaza, while 6 civilians and 67 soldiers were killed on the Israeli side. Israel found itself surrounded by countries that wanted to attack it. However, they had a strong state, with a good army and a solid economic position. Since its independence, it has sought to reduce the presence of Palestinians. But why is the Israeli state so powerful, and how does it achieve so many victories with far fewer men? On one hand, it is the country that receives the most military aid from the United States, alongside Ukraine. On the other hand, its military training is crucial, as military service is mandatory for both men and women starting at the age of 18. And we cannot forget one of its best weapons in recent years, the Iron Dome. This defense system is designed to intercept and destroy rockets and missiles launched at them. The system detects the projectile in response by firing a missile, preventing it from falling on Israeli territory. On October 7, 2023, while Israelis were celebrating a holiday, Hamas armed groups launched an attack on Israel from the Gaza Strip, known as Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. The surprise attack began early that morning with at least 3,000 missiles against Israel and incursions in vehicles into Israeli territory. Nearly 2,000 Palestinian militants breached the Gaza-Israel barrier, attacked military bases, and massacred civilians in nearby Israeli communities. You surely remember the images from that day, especially at the Reims Music Festival. As the festival was underway, alarms went off due to incoming missiles. Some of the attackers arrived in paragliders, while others came armed in trucks or motorcycles, bearing the insignia of Hamas. They fired indiscriminately at the crowd, sowing chaos. Hamas militants captured hostages, sparking a new violent war that continues to this day. Israel was caught off guard but responded with bombings and subsequent reinvasion of the Gaza Strip. Israeli airstrikes and ground offensives killed over 20,000 Palestinian people, according to Gaza's Ministry of Health, 1/3 of whom were children. This led to harsh criticism from many organizations, as Israel violated international humanitarian law by carrying out indiscriminate attacks that did not distinguish between civilians and military targets, and by destroying thousands of Palestinian homes. Moreover, the Israeli government also cut off all supplies to Gaza, including food, water, fuel, and medicine. Medical personnel also came under attack in the area. By December, 23 out of a total of 36 hospitals had been forced to close due to damage and lack of electricity. The World Health Organization reported that 600 patients and medical staff had died in attacks targeting medical facilities. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, the Lebanese group Hezbollah launched guided rockets and artillery shells at Israeli-occupied positions in the Golan Heights on October 8, 2023, the day after Hamas' major attack. The Israeli government retaliated with drone strikes and artillery fire against Hezbollah positions near the Golan Heights-Lebanon border. The attacks followed Hezbollah's expressions of support and praise for Hamas' attacks on Israel. Subsequently, the clashes escalated. In summary, the past decade has brought nothing but conflict in this region. The prospect of Palestine obtaining its own state seems distant. Currently, the offensive grows more violent each day, leaving us with horrific images of victims of this war, which for now shows no sign of coming to an end.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, and if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!